The residents of Meadowbrook Senior Living have routines. Mrs. Chen waters her plastic flowers at 7 a.m. Mr. Johnson argues with the TV at noon. And Henry Mitchell dances alone at 8:47 p.m. every single night. But Henry's routine is different. Because Henry's routine isn't about passing time, it's about keeping time. Keeping a promise. Keeping a love alive that death tried to end. And when Clara, a 24-year-old nurse drowning in student debt and a failing relationship, finally understands why Henry dances with empty air, she learns something about love that no one had ever taught her. Something that would save her own broken heart. The fluorescent lights of Meadowbrook Senior Living buzzed their constant hymn at 8:45 p.m. Clara Bennett pushed her medication cart down the 4th-floor hallway, her phone vibrating for the 7th time in her scrub pocket. She didn't need to look. She knew it was Tyler. Another text. Another excuse. Another promise he wouldn't keep. They'd been together for 2 years. Or at least, that's what Clara called it. Tyler called it figuring things out. Which apparently meant texting her at midnight asking where she was, but never showing up for dinner dates. It meant saying, "I love you," after 3 drinks, but forgetting her birthday. It meant promising to move in together soon, but never actually looking at apartments. Clara was 24 years old, drowning in $80,000 of nursing school debt, working night shifts at a senior living facility, and clinging to a relationship that everyone, including her own reflection in the mirror, knew was already over. If you believe in the kind of love that doesn't quit, the kind of promise that outlasts death itself, then please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Courage, and share this story. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this remind us what we should never settle for less than. At exactly 8:47 p.m., Clara heard it. The sound she'd heard every night for 3 months since starting her shift here. The creak of old floorboards from room 214. The gentle shuffle of feet. The whisper of movement in otherwise complete silence. Henry Mitchell was dancing again. Clara had seen it dozens of times. The elderly man, 82 years old, standing in the empty space beside his bed, arms raised as if holding an invisible partner, feet moving in slow, practiced steps. No music playing from any device. No TV on. No radio. Just silence. And tears. Always tears streaming down his weathered face. The other nurses said it was dementia. Or maybe Alzheimer's. They said it sadly, like it was another symptom to chart, another decline to document. "Poor Mr. Mitchell," they'd whisper. "He thinks his wife is still here. Doesn't remember she passed 5 years ago." But something about Henry's dancing bothered Clara. Not bothered like it upset her. Bothered like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Because when Henry danced, his eyes weren't vacant. They weren't confused. They were present, aware, purposeful. Tonight, Clara's phone buzzed again. Tyler's 8th text. "Where are you? You said you'd call. Why do you always do this?" Clara stared at the message. The accusation. The blame. The way he somehow always made it her fault when he was the one who never showed up. And something inside her snapped. She turned off her phone, tucked it into her locker, and walked to room 214. Henry was there, as always. Arms raised. Feet moving. Eyes closed. Swaying gently to music only he could hear. His thin frame barely filled his cardigan sweater. His white hair neatly combed. His face peaceful despite the tears. Clara knocked softly on the doorframe. Henry didn't stop dancing. Didn't open his eyes. Just continued his slow waltz with invisible arms. "Mr. Mitchell?" Clara said quietly. "One moment, dear," Henry replied, his voice soft but clear. "The song isn't over yet." Clara waited. Watched. And realized something crucial. Henry wasn't confused. He knew exactly where he was. He knew exactly what he was doing. After another minute, Henry stopped. Opened his eyes. Looked at Clara with complete clarity and smiled. "Thank you for waiting," he said. "Margaret doesn't like it when I stop mid-song. Says it's bad luck to break a dance." Clara stepped into the room. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't mean to intrude, but I've been watching you dance every night for 3 months. And I need to ask, why? Why do you dance alone?" Henry's smile widened. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Sit down, young lady. If you've got time, I've got a story." Clara sat. "Before we continue, pause for just a moment. Comment below, what's the longest you've kept a promise to someone you love? Share your story, we want to hear it." Henry eased himself into his recliner, his joints creaking with age. "I'm not dancing alone," he began. "I'm dancing with my wife, Margaret Louise Mitchell. Most beautiful woman I ever saw. Still is, even though she's been gone 5 years." "I'm sorry for your loss," Clara said softly. "Don't be sorry yet," Henry chuckled. "You haven't heard the good part. You see, Margaret and I got married on October 12, 1963. We were young, stupid, broke. The wedding was in her parents' backyard because we couldn't afford a venue. The reception was potluck. Our wedding cake was made by her aunt who forgot the sugar. Can you imagine? A bitter wedding cake." Clara smiled despite herself. "But none of that mattered," Henry continued, his eyes distant with memory. "Because at exactly 8:47 p.m., the sun was setting, and someone put on Etta James, at last, and Margaret took my hand, and we had our first dance as husband and wife." Henry's voice softened. "And during that dance, I whispered something in her ear. I said, 'Maggie, I promise you this, every single night, for the rest of our lives, we will dance together. I don't care if we're tired. I don't care if we're angry. I don't care if the world is falling apart. At 8:47 p.m., we dance. Because this moment, right now, is the happiest I've ever been. And I never want to forget it.'" Clara felt her throat tighten. "Margaret laughed," Henry said. "She called me a ridiculous romantic. She said there was no way we could keep that promise. Life would get in the way. Kids would get in the way. Work would get in the way. But I told her, 'Watch me.'" Henry's face broke into a wide grin. "And for 60 years, young lady, we danced. Every single night. At 8:47 p.m. 60 years. Clara whispered. "You never missed a night?" "Not one," Henry said firmly. "Not when our son Michael was born and we were running on 2 hours of sleep. Not when our daughter Sarah had colic and screamed for 3 months straight. Not when I was working double shifts at the factory. Not when Margaret's mother died and she didn't want to get out of bed. Not when we had the biggest fight of our marriage and weren't speaking to each other. At 8:47 p.m., we put everything aside and we danced." Clara thought about Tyler. About the dinner dates he missed. The promises he broke. The texts that always came too late. "How?" Clara asked. "How did you do it for 60 years?" Henry leaned forward. "Because it wasn't about the dancing, dear. It was about the promise. It was about showing up. Every day. Every night. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Anyone can love someone when it's easy. Real love is about loving them when it's not." He paused. "We didn't have a perfect marriage. We argued. We struggled. There were nights I came home exhausted and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. There were nights Margaret was furious with me and didn't want to be touched. But at 8:47, we danced. And you know what happened? By the end of that dance, 3 minutes and 42 seconds, same song every time, we remembered why we chose each other." Clara felt tears building behind her eyes. She thought about Tyler's texts. The accusations. The way he made her feel like she was never enough. "What happened?" Clara asked quietly. "Why do you still dance if she's gone?" Henry's face grew somber. 10 years ago, Margaret was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Early onset. Aggressive. The doctors said she'd decline quickly. And they were right. Within 2 years, she didn't remember our children's names. Within 3 years, she didn't remember our address. Within 4 years, she didn't remember me. Henry's voice cracked. But I remembered her. And I remembered my promise. He stood slowly, walking to his dresser, pulling out an old leather journal. I started writing everything down. Every dance we'd ever had. Every song. Every conversation during those 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Because even if she couldn't remember, I could remember for both of us. He handed Clara the journal. She opened it carefully. Page after page of dates. October 12, 1963. October 13, 1963. October 14, 1963. On and on. 60 years of dates. 60 years of dances. Beside each date, Henry had written a note. October 12, 1963, our first dance. She stepped on my foot twice. Perfect. December 25, 1965, Christmas. Michael asleep upstairs. She hummed the melody because we didn't want to wake him. July 4, 1976, Bicentennial. We danced on the back porch. Fireworks in the distance. She said it felt like the whole country was celebrating us. March 3, 1998, worst fight we ever had. I wanted to skip it. She grabbed my hand anyway. By the end of the song, I remembered why I married her. June 18, 2015, she didn't recognize me today. But when I took her hand at 8:47, she smiled. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, I got my Maggie back. Clara's tears fell onto the pages. The last 5 years were the hardest, Henry said. Margaret was in memory care. I visited every day. And every night at 8:47, I'd put on our song, and I'd take her hand, and we'd dance. Even when she couldn't stand anymore, I'd hold her hands and sway. Even when she couldn't move, I'd dance beside her bed and pretend she was in my arms. He wiped his eyes. She died on February 3, 2019. Peacefully. In her sleep. And that night, at 8:47, I danced alone for the first time in 60 years. Clara's chest ached. Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Henry interrupted gently. Because here's what I learned, Clara. Love isn't about the other person being there. It's about you showing up. Every single day. Every single night. It's about keeping your promises even when it costs you something. Even when it hurts. Even when the person you made the promise to can't remember you made it. He looked at her directly. I still dance at 8:47 because I'm still a man who keeps his promises. And Margaret may not be here in body, but she's here in memory. In promise. In love that doesn't end just because someone stops breathing. Clara couldn't hold back anymore. She sobbed. Not delicate tears. Full, body-shaking sobs. Because she realized in that moment that she'd been settling for text messages and excuses when this man, this 82-year-old man, had shown her what love actually looked like. If this story is touching your heart right now, please don't scroll past. Like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Courage, and share it with someone who needs to understand what real commitment looks like. Henry handed her a tissue. What's his name? Clara looked up, startled. What? The boy who's making you cry into your phone every night. What's his name? Clara laughed through her tears. Tyler. And he's not. Not worth it. Henry finished. Clara nodded miserably. Henry sat down beside her. Can I tell you something, Clara? Something Margaret told me once when I was being a damn fool. Clara nodded. She said, Henry Mitchell, love isn't about finding someone who makes you happy. It's about being someone who makes them happy. And if you're the only one doing the work, that's not love. That's volunteering. Clara let out a shocked laugh. Is this boy showing up for you? Henry asked. Is he keeping his promises? Is he dancing with you at 8:47 every single night, even when he doesn't feel like it? Clara shook her head. Then he doesn't deserve you, Henry said simply. Because you, young lady, deserve someone who will keep dancing even after you're gone. And that boy sounds like he can't even show up when you're right here. Clara looked at her phone in her pocket. At the unanswered texts. At the relationship she'd been clinging to because she thought it was better than being alone. But being with someone who doesn't show up is just another kind of alone, isn't it? Mr. Mitchell, Clara said quietly. Can I ask you something? Anything, dear. Would you teach me? Teach you what? How to dance. Like you and Margaret did. I want to know what it feels like. To dance with someone who keeps their promises. Henry's eyes welled up. He stood slowly, joints creaking, and offered his hand. It would be my honor. Clara stood. Henry took one of her hands, placed the other on his shoulder, and began to count. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it. Just follow my lead. They swayed slowly in the small room. No music playing. Just the sound of their feet shuffling across the linoleum floor. Just an old man teaching a young woman what love actually looked like. You know what Margaret used to say? Henry asked as they danced. She said, Henry, I don't care if we're rich or poor. I don't care if we have a big house or a small apartment. All I care about is whether you'll still be dancing with me when we're old. Henry smiled. And I was. Until her very last day. That's how you measure a life, Clara. Not by how much money you made or how successful you were. But by whether you kept your promises. By whether you showed up. By whether you danced at 8:47, even when everything else fell apart. When the imaginary song ended, Henry stepped back and bowed slightly, the way a gentleman from another era would. Clara curtsied, feeling silly and sacred all at once. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, Clara whispered. No, dear. Thank you. That's the first time I've danced with a partner in 5 years. Margaret would have liked you. Clara left room 214 with her heart completely rearranged. She walked to the break room, took out her phone, and stared at Tyler's texts. All 8 of them. All accusing her of not being available. Of not trying hard enough. Of always making excuses. She typed one final message, I'm done settling for text messages. I deserve someone who shows up. Who keeps promises. Who dances at 8:47 every single night. Goodbye, Tyler. She hit send. And for the first time in 2 years, she felt free. Before we reach the end of this story, pause and comment. Have you ever settled for less than you deserved? What made you finally walk away? Your story matters. 6 months later, Clara was still working at Meadowbrook. But everything had changed. She'd enrolled in a master's program. She'd started volunteering at a grief support group. She'd learned to be alone without being lonely. And every night at 8:47 p.m., she'd stop by room 214. Henry would be there, dancing as always. And sometimes, not every night, but sometimes, Clara would knock softly, and Henry would pause his dance, and they'd sway together for 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Henry teaching Clara what a promise kept looked like. Clara showing Henry that Margaret's love had created ripples that spread far beyond one marriage. One evening, as they finished their dance, Henry said, You know, Clara, Margaret would be so proud of you. You didn't just walk away from what wasn't working. You walked toward what you deserved. I learned from the best, Clara replied. Maybe, Henry said with a twinkle in his eye. But you did the hard part. You chose yourself. That's not easy when you've been taught that love means sacrificing everything. Is that what love is? Clara asked. Sacrifice? No, Henry said firmly. Love is partnership. It's two people choosing each other every single day. Sacrifice implies you're giving up something. But real love means you're gaining something. You're gaining a partner who shows up, who keeps dancing, who remembers the promises even when it's hard. He looked at his watch. You know what today is? Tuesday, October 12th, Henry said softly. 61 years ago today, I married the love of my life. 61 years of dancing at 8:47. Clara's eyes filled. You still think about her every day, don't you? Every second, Henry said. But I don't think about her with sadness anymore. I think about her with gratitude. I got 60 years with the most incredible woman in the world. How many people can say that? That night, after her shift ended, Clara drove to the cemetery. She'd never been before, but Henry had told her where Margaret was buried. She stood in front of the headstone, Margaret Louise Mitchell. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She danced every day. Clara placed a small bouquet of flowers on the grave. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for teaching Henry what love looked like. And thank you for him teaching me. The wind rustled through the trees. And for just a moment, just one brief, impossible moment, Clara could have sworn she heard music. Etta James. At last. 3 months later, Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep. The nurses found him at 8:48 p.m., 1 minute after his nightly dance would have ended. On his nightstand was his journal, open to the last page. Clara was the one who read it. October 12, 2024, 61 years. 61 years of dancing with the love of my life. And tonight, Maggie, I'm coming home. Save me a dance. At Henry's funeral, Clara stood at the podium and told his story. About the promise. About the dances. About 61 years of showing up at 8:47 p.m. And she ended with this. Henry Mitchell taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about small, consistent promises. It's about showing up. Every day. Every night. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She looked out at the crowd. We live in a world of text messages and broken promises. A world where people give up when things get difficult. But Henry showed us another way. He showed us that real love, the kind that outlasts death, is built on promises kept. On dances at 8:47. On choosing someone every single day for 61 years. Clara's voice broke. So tonight, at 8:47 p.m., I'm going to dance. And I'm going to remember what real love looks like. And I'm never, ever, going to settle for less than that again. That night, at exactly 8:47 p.m., Clara stood in her living room, put on At Last, and danced alone. Arms raised. Eyes closed. Feet moving in the steps Henry had taught her. And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in heaven, maybe in the space between heartbeats, Henry and Margaret Mitchell danced together too. The way they always had. The way they always would. At 8:47. Every single night. Forever. If this story changed how you think about love, please like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Courage, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tonight, at 8:47 p.m., dance. Dance for the promises you've kept. Dance for the love you deserve. Dance because Henry and Margaret showed us that some promises never die. Leave a comment below. What promise will you keep tonight? We're listening.